Under order. Robin, if you could call the roll.
Sure.
Commissioner Hawley?
Here.
Commissioner Bach?
Here.
Commissioner Gentis?
Here.
Commissioner Turin?
Here.
Commissioner Jim Schaefer?
Here.
Commissioner Stoker?
Here.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer?
Here.
Alderman Nurbin?
Here.
Alderman Stralchuk?
Here. Okay, great. I'm not seeing any minutes in this packet, so first item on the agenda is, oh, it is.
Yeah, they're there.
Sorry, she circled the public hearing, so I'd remember to go into public hearing, and then I looked at the blue circle and not at the minutes.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Do we have a motion and a second? So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the minutes? All in favor of the minutes as shown, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Second item on the agenda is a public hearing for North Shore Bank. The applicant is seeking a conditional use grant extension approval for the previously approved bank building with rear drive-through for the property located at 11319 North Port Washington Road. This was previously approved in October of 2020. Need a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved. Second.
All in favor of going into public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there anybody that would like to speak on this item?
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to close public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. So North Shore Bank, Papula, if you could give us just a quick update on what's going on there.
Sure, Alderman. Planning Commission approved the conditional use grant and building and site plan for the project on Port Washington Road on October 26, 2020. Conditional use grants require the project to either obtain building permits or for the use to commence on the site no later than 1 year from the date of approval. And although the applicant has made progress and has been working on obtaining those building permits, they haven't. And since it's after October 26th, their 1 year deadline has extended. They did apply to go on Planning Commission. Obviously, today is beyond October 26th, but they met the deadline to get on the November meeting. So this is just an extension of the conditional use grant, and the requirement to pull permits within a year still applies. So they'll have another year to acquire their building permits or commence the use on the site. So we recommend approval based upon all the other conditions that Planning Commission approved last October.
Great, and the extension would be for 1 year, correct?
Yep, that applies to all conditional use grants. So your approval just reinstates the existing conditional use grant for another year.
Great. From tonight, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
Yeah.
Alderman? Becky, Alderman, I was close.
Not.
Becky Schaefer?
Is part of the reason that the building permit hasn't been approved, I'm trying to find where I read this, but something about environmental testing? Is that, like, is there a reason why it hasn't, why we're having to grant the extension?
I believe the applicant is here, but yes, as the narrative stated, they have been working on this site. They just completed the environmental assessment, but I'll have them speak to that.
I guess I remember talking about this one. I don't think I was in favor of it, but here we are. But because there's wetlands on the site, I'm just wondering if there was something that came up during the environmental testing that has prevented any progress.
No, I'm David Kane. I'm representing North Shore Bank as a vice president. Nothing has come up that would prevent us from building. It's just this environment, trying to get through it. We're planning on demoing the building here in the next couple of weeks. We just had a lot of little things to go through, so
Okay.
nothing really came up.
Yeah, I'm. You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm Ian, the architect with Nolan Carter. Yeah, it's more so just been the year of unfortunate delays
Understand.
and labor shortages, things like that. Going through the process, making sure that we're doing our due diligence, but the process is all going on. So the extension was more of our current building environment than there was anything that came up that was of any importance.
Great, thank you.
Any additional questions or comments for staff? Looking for a motion then?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Robin, can you just call the roll?
Sure.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hawley?
Aye.
Commissioner Chorin,
Aye.
Commissioner Jim Schaefer,
Aye.
Commissioner Stoker,
Aye.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer,
Aye.
Alderman Nerben,
Aye.
Commissioner Gentes,
Aye.
and Alderman Strelchak.
Aye. That motion passes. Next item on the agenda is Applied Buildings. Alice, thank you very much. Next item on Applied Buildings LLC, the applicant is seeking a building and site plan and fill approval for a proposed 36,843 square foot multi-tenant office warehouse building and certified survey map approval to allow for a 3-lot land division for the property located at 5715 West Donges Bay Road. You see the applicant did come forward, and Papula, if you could just give us a rundown on what you're seeing on your end.
Yes, Alderman. So the proposal is for a multi-tenant building, and it's the new location for HVA Products, who is currently located on Bear Road, and Specialty Software Group, with additional spec shell space for future expansion and or tenant improvements. And the requested building and site plan is for proposed Lot 1 on the CSM, which I will show up on the screen in a little bit. The proposal does meet all the requirements of the B5 zoning district, besides the parking requirement, which I'd like to go over a bit. The applicant indicated that the 2 tenants will have a total of 16 employees. Based upon the parking code, staff calculated the parking requirement based upon an office use. So that came out to 87 stalls plus additional stalls depending on who the user of the spec space is. The 2 tenants, the 2 known tenants are occupying Suite B. So if you see on your screen, there is the first floor for Suite B and then an additional second floor. And then the Suite A is currently spec. The high parking calculation is in part due to the high parking requirement for an office user. The code requires 1 stall per 200 square foot of gross leasable space. Now this comes out to roughly 17,000 square feet of office being utilized by these 2 tenants. So that really increased the parking count for this user. However, based upon the number of employees that the user, that the applicant indicated, staff believes that this is sufficient parking for the site. And the site does have potential for parking lot expansion in the future if that is required. I did also receive first and second floor plan. These are not final, so they were not included in the packet, but they're up on the screen. It does show that the first floor is really where the offices are in the conference room, and then the second floor is really community space. So the second floor really doesn't add any additional employees to the site. So staff really took into account the number of 16 total employees when we looked at the parking requirement. So staff does support the parking as is. And then in addition, a lighting plan was submitted that meets the code requirements, as well as a landscaping plan. Staff just has 1 condition for the landscaping, and that they add additional screening along the south property line. So if I can just get to the landscaping plan. They really did a great job with the landscaping, but they did not screen the south property line. They did screen the stormwater pond from the building. However, staff is recommending additional canopy trees along the south property line. Other than that, staff does recommend approval of the building and site plan, as well as the certified survey map, which shows 3 lots which meet the requirements of the B5 district. The applicant is also requesting fill permit approval for fill over 1,000 cubic yards. Engineering is here if you have any questions related to the fill, but other than that, staff thinks this is a great project and will be a great addition to the industrial area and recommends approval, subject to the conditions in that report.
Applicants, if you could introduce yourselves and if you have anything to add.
My name's Stephen Smith, Stephen Pierce Smith Architects. I live at 11090 Weston Drive in Mequon. With me here is Chris Mehta.
Building owner and Applied Buildings.
Great. Thank you.
And we would concur with the staff, given that Chris's use really only used it. They have 16 employees. That leaves 42 left for about 14,000 square feet. That's roughly about three spaces, per 1,000 square feet, which is this is really an office warehouse mix. And so that parking ratio would be sufficient for that building. And as was noted by staff, there is additional space available that we could add parking if need be, but the thought was, why put it in if you're not going to use it? So we'd rather see the green space than the parking stalls not being utilized. With regard to the landscape comment, the only thing I would add, and I haven't discussed this with Chris, is that the intent was, what we've talked about, was actually having the possibility of two back-to-back buildings, one of which would be facing the pond. And so I guess, not that we couldn't add some additional landscaping, but it would be nice not to screen the pond from the next building. And so I guess I would ask the staff to take that in consideration. That could be the front of another building. Admittedly, there may be some parking in front of that building, but we wouldn't want to necessarily screen that pond from that future building. So if they could take that in consideration as we look at a revised landscape plan. And that's basically it. I'm not sure, Chris, if you want to add anything to it, but.
No, to add what Steve's saying about the pond, we were looking to make that more of a landscape feature as well than some kind of concrete fixture. So we wanted to use that as kind of a centerpiece between the two buildings.
Okay. And that southern property is part of the land division, correct?
That's lot 2.
It's still part of lot 1. So if you can look up on the screen, this is the dark bold line is a property line. So all the other property lines are landscape except for this portion, which is still on lot 1, which is still on this site. And it doesn't have to be heavily landscaped. I think we would want to see just a scattering of trees along there. It is a requirement that we've recommended on other sites that you have landscaping, especially if another building is going to be there, that building might want landscaping treatment.
And I think I may be reacting more to the term screening. We say start screening that. Screening implies a more heavily planted area. We would want to see it be more open. We don't object to adding some additional landscaping. It's just trying not to screen the views from the future building to the pond and of the future building, period. So we'll work with staff on that. We're not opposed to the suggestion. We just wouldn't want to heavily plant it is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And we would be okay with working with the applicant on just scattered trees along that property line.
And Papula, you listed that as a condition, right?
That they would be required to add additional canopy trees along the south property line. Yes, it's an existing condition.
Okay. It doesn't say screening. What condition is it?
It says it's number 4, additional landscape treatment along the south property line.
Okay. So as long as there was canopy trees, you'd be okay with
That'd be
that?
fine.
Versus
Yep.
Okay. Commissioner? Commissioner Jim Schaefer?
I very much like the architecture. I thought it was very well done.
Thank you.
I like the detail, the steel detail around the entrances, emphasizing it. I thought that was also well done.
I've got to give credit where credit's due, is at the request of my client. Typically, I'm used to having the bit marks in my mouth, and in this case, a client challenged us to come up with something that was new and different from Mequon, something that gave it a little bit more architecture, and even some of the screening elements I worked with Chris and his wife on that, and they had their hand. This is very much at their request to put up a nice looking building. Even on the south side where you have loading docks, Chris's suggestion was to have actually glass garage doors so that it can become a patio area in lieu of looking like a loading dock. And I love it when I have clients like that want to do more than less. So again, credit goes to Chris and his wife for those suggestions.
I did have one question. What color is the precast?
The precast, the intent is to have it we'll utilize more of a white cement,
Okay.
which will give it more of a buff color and have it look more stone with some either sandblasting or acid etching to give some of the reveals some depth. Not a big fan, not necessarily to say it wouldn't have any exposed aggregate, but we want to have it look clean and modern, and so The white cement is a higher end finish. This isn't going to be a painted precast. It's going to be a nice looking stone color precast in a buff color. And the white cement gives it that pop.
That's good, because when I printed it out and I looked at the packet, it looked pink.
No, you know what happens, and it depends on the printers. It depends on even looking at a screen, unless Adriana changed things while I was gone. No, the intent would be, this would be a buff. It's called a white cement, and I could give you some other examples. We did Briggs and Stratton and Menominee Falls, and it has that light white cement. It looks better than the painted precast.
Mm-hmm.
It's a higher end finish. And again, their desire was to have a more modern looking building, and so we were able to add a little bit more glass and have a higher end precast than you typically would see in some of these buildings.
Thank you.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer?
That lot 3, that's kind of the biggest chunk of the parcel. I assume that's being kind of sectioned off because it's mostly not buildable. It's 42 acres. That's mostly
correct.
wetland there,
It's
right?
mostly wetland.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's virtually all wetland, so.
So it's, I don't know. I just am picturing this coming forward with someone trying to build on it eventually. I'm hoping.
The lot 3, the one
Lot
that
3.
had was across the street. South of it is, let's take a look here. So on that cross, if that port, I see. Yep, never mind, you're right. So lot 3 actually will have some buildable area on it. We will work with the DNR. We were able to actually have some of the areas that were called isolated wetlands that were man-made created.
Okay.
Those have been removed on this particular lot.
On lot 1.
On lot 1.
On lot, yeah.
And
I think
even
lot 3.
maybe a lot 2. That's been looked at and signed off on by the DNR.
Mm.
When we get into lot 3, we'll certainly have to work with the DNR or anything. In the wetlands that currently wetlands are not intended, those will stay. We'll have to work around those.
This is adjacent kind of to the trail, right? The interurban trail is near.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
East of
So I'm
this.
familiar with the parcel. I think there's a lot more natural. I feel like my voice is going in and out with this. There's a lot more natural wetlands on that lot.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yep.
And then my other question, and this maybe is, you don't have to answer it. There's 2 independent businesses operating out of the same suite? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just, we have the same now on 10400 Bear Road, so we're just shifting that to this building.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Commissioner Choi?
This is a question more to staff with regards to the finishes and materials. When do we get to see those? In the past, I think people have brought samples in.
If you wanted to see those materials, we just felt that we supported the design, and I guess we didn't think to.
We have no problem
materials.
in bringing and working with staff or coming back and showing the materials.
Well, I think staff should see the materials. And I would rely on their expertise to accept that, hearing our comments here.
You don't trust me, Marty?
Alderman Nerman?
I had a question on the parking. I know someone said there was, well, there's some feedback. Someone said there was room for future expansion. We're like 2/3 of what the code says if this is office use. But I understand it's not completely office use now, but fast forward 15, 20 years, something different happens. Where might that parking go and how much more is available?
To the south there, you'll see a large, on the southern side of the building, first of all, there's a large green space. That could be, again, reclaimed for parking depending upon, that pad is itself 60 feet out from the building. 60 feet is really the same width as the parking lot to the north. And I'm not suggesting that. I would say, again, you could add a row of cars. There's a way of adding cars in there. It could be a double loaded, it could be a single loaded based upon need. But that could get you, right now we're at, I believe, 58 spaces. So to get closer to 80, you're looking at 22 spots. If we had to get, you could also effectively grow that lot a little bit further on the north lot to the east. I don't know that we'd do that, that's something else. We could grab a few more spots in that regard. And so there is the capability, and I could tell you could take and even around the other areas, grab some more areas. The thought was not to put it in, and I agree with you. You want to be able to demonstrate the ability to get it, but at the same time, if you don't need it, in this case, Chris's operation, there wasn't going to be a mezzanine. He just needed some warehouse space. He had the mezzanine as kind of play space for his office, and that's, I commend him for that. So part of it is you don't want to punish him for doing something because he wants to have more space for his employees than what you would normally see in any office. So again, that's the reason why there is a perceived deficiency in the parking, but I believe that we can comfortably provide additional parking if need be.
And then maybe a question for staff related to that. Do we commonly get requests for waivers to the parking requirement for similar uses? And if we do, is there a pattern? And should we reevaluate our code? I don't know who wants to take that. Maybe
agree.
Jack.
Yeah, I mean, we have approved waivers to uses, especially in the industrial park, because you do have office uses. If it was truly manufacturing, it would only be dependent upon number of employees on the largest work shift. In this case, since it's office, we have to look at the square footage. So the code is kind of goofy in that sense.
I would answer yes and yes to your two questions. The first part is a waiver seems a little bit strong language. We actually have language in the code that allows the planning commission to be flexible with the parking. We don't want to over park sites. And sometimes, an office user, maybe 200 square feet per gross leasable area is pretty large. So we'd look at that to change that in the future. But again, we've always had that flexibility built in because, we have some businesses that have very, intense users, kind of like the old Doral Dental, Corporate Park. They exceeded our requirements because they packed their cubicles in pretty tight. But then you have other ones that have a very, open area concept so that, you're nowhere near going to meet the parking. So the flexibility is there in the code. It's built in for that reason. But yeah, we'll definitely look at future changes to our parking to adjust to, I think, more modern times. So.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Other questions or comments? So it sounds,
I was going to make a motion to approve per staff's recommendations, but if you were still in discussion, I apologize.
No, that works. We got a motion and a second. And a second. Commissioner Chorin, how do you want to address staff seeing the actual building materials prior to? Is that what you'd like to see as a friendly amendment?
A friendly amendment that staff works with the actual materials for approval.
I'll accept the friendly amendment.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? We got a motion and a second. Let's call the roll.
Commissioner Hawley?
Aye.
Commissioner Chorin?
Aye.
Commissioner Gentis?
Aye.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer?
Aye.
Commissioner Stoker?
Aye.
Commissioner Jim Schaefer?
Aye.
Alderman Nurbin?
Aye.
Alderman Strelchek?
All right. Passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming forward with
Have a
that.
very happy Thanksgiving to you all.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Next item is the green at Mequon. The applicant is seeking a concept plan approval and rezoning recommendation approval from R3OA residential 1 acre agricultural overlay zoning to R3 PUD planned unit development zoning for proposed 7-lot subdivision for the property located at the southwest corner of Friedstadt Road and Villa Grove Road. Jack.
So I have the concept plan up on the screen for you. We've been working with the applicant for a few months on this, and basically this property is currently zoned R3, which is a 1 acre zoning, but a substantial portion of the south end of the site is wetlands. So the request was to do a conservation type subdivision based on a yield, which was in your packet at 7 lots. So there's a 7-lot yield, and the plan that the applicant came up with is shown on the screen. So they would have a private road access off of Villa Grove Road, and there'd be lots basically surrounding the private road. There was a couple concerns. I had our city forester go out and look at the trees. We found a substantial number of specimen trees, so we had the applicant go back and GPS them. As you can see, they're shown on here. There's a big bank of trees in this location. There's a grouping right here. There's two right here, and then there's a couple over in this area here. So after discussions with the forester, we felt that these two are white pines. They're probably not in the greatest conditions, and it's going to be really difficult to kind of work around them. So he was okay with having those removed. This area here is a substantial cluster of arborvitae that provides a nice screen to the properties to the west. So we'd like to see a tree preservation easement in this location. This area is a cluster of hickories. We'd like to see these remain. There's one large one there. That would involve modifying the stormwater pond in this location. And then these are three grouping of black walnut. Two of the three will probably not be impacted anyway, but there's one that's kind of on lot one, which we'd like to see remain at this point. But we wanted to let the commission know. The request for specimen tree removal will come at the time of preliminary plat, but we want to let you know the ramifications of approving this concept plan. So there might be some discussion about that tree in this location by the applicant. Other things the staff was recommending that we want to see these lots 5 and 6 basically have wetlands on the lot. Typically for conservation subdivisions, we like to get those wetlands off private lots. So we'd like to see that concept plan adjusted to keep the wetlands off the private lots. And then we would also like to see a tree preservation agreement to have a consistent treatment of this area here along Freistadt Road. This will be the back of the yards of these three developments. We don't want to see inconsistent patterns of landscaping in this area, so we'd like to see a holistic approach to this grouping right here as part of the buffer from Freistadt Road. Other than that, we recommend approval, and have any questions, we're here to answer them for you. Thank you.
Great. The applicant, if you could introduce yourself and if you have anything to add.
Mike Perlowitz, landowner.
Hi. Nice to see you.
I don't have much to add other than what Jack presented.
Okay. Staff conditions that they've listed would be all right with you so far?
Correct, yes.
Commissioners.
I guess this is for the developer. You've got 50 by 70 foot pads shown, 50 foot depth in today's age with 3-car garages. I'm assuming these have to be side loading garages in this.
There won't be a requirement for that here.
Okay. My curiosity is location for sanitary systems. A couple of these lots, I'm struggling to see. Selfishly, I'm thinking if I was ever to build a house on one, I don't know if it's going to be public or not, but I'm struggling to see where you're going to get a mound system.
These are sewer. They're all sewer and water. This is within our sewer service boundary.
That makes it a whole lot more desirable. Scratch that question. I think it's a great subdivision. I think it's a really nicely done.
Thank you.
And confirming sewer and water would be a requirement.
Yes, it's in the sewer service area, so sewer is required.
Commissioner Becky Shaver.
Having the stormwater ponds on the lots.
That is not always typical, and we have done it lately. It's difficult here because we have to keep the stormwater ponds outside the floodplain, which is this dashed line here. So you could do something maybe down in here and then shorten up this lot a little bit, but that gets a little tight. And over the last several years, we've done it a few times. It's not desirable, but with an easement across them, it still has the same effect. And in the last couple subdivisions, I think we've had 1 or 2 cases of that. So we try to avoid it, but there's such a large portion of wetlands on there. It's going to be hard to do, but we can continue to work with them to see if we can adjust.
What if there's a lower yield?
Well, yeah, if there's less yield, but then that's an economic issue. But there's nothing that
It's
says
always an economic issue.
There's nothing that says they can't do that. Again, it's desirable, but there's nothing that says that we can't have them on private lots.
For a conservation subdivision, where's the outlot? Is it all the unusable space at the back?
Yes, if you look at the map, everything down here will be outlot 1. They actually prepared a preliminary plat, which is a little bit ahead of the game right now. This typically is just a concept plan. But this outlot is basically all wetland and floodplain, floodway, except for this little portion right here. But we're requesting that obviously to just get moved up to incorporate the entire wetland within the outlot.
That seems not. Is it really a conservation subdivision if there's not an outlot that is, I thought the whole point, or part of the rationale, or the, what's the word I want? Understanding behind a conservation subdivision was that you could have these smaller lots, and then you had a space that was usable to increase your yield so that it met the.
Well, one of the benefits of conservation subdivision is to keep environmental features off individual lots, which is one of the goals. And that's what we're trying to do here. I mean, if you look at the yield plan, you know, this is something that, you know, they would probably have to tweak a little bit, but it is, they could build this. And if you can see the lots here, the pads would be in the front, but you would have a large portion of these lots going down to here that would be in the floodplain, that would have wetlands on them, and we'd like to avoid that. And in this case as well, the other thing that we benefit from is a coordinated design. I mean, these lots would have frontage driveways off of Freistadt Road, which we'd prefer not to have. So I think, you know, yes, in most larger conservation subdivisions that we would prefer to see a little bit more in terms of amenities, but this is such a small site and it's very restricted by the amount of wetlands on that. But we've worked, and this is I mean, the applicant was willing to work with us as best we could, and this is pretty much the best we could come up with to at least preserve the environmental features on the site and keep them off of private property.
I don't know. Every time I feel like I've said this before, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I'm not in favor, and for some of the questions that I've asked, it doesn't seem, I would prefer a lower yield if we're going to build on it, and if that's not economically feasible, then I guess I would question, is it the right place for a subdivision?
Well, if you don't approve the conservation subdivision, the yield has already been determined, so he can build the 7 lots in accordance with the yield plan. There's nothing we can really do to prevent that.
Yeah.
Could you go back to the yield plan? I think it's already R3. I get Jack's point. It's R3. He could build whatever's on that yield plan today. Do you like this better than the proposal in front of us? I think I like this less. I agree. Keeping driveways off of Freistadt
That's not negotiable.
is totally necessary. There's too many as it is, and it's practically a racetrack till you get to the speed tables. So it'd be quite dangerous to add more. I think that's what's before us today.
Jack, we talked about this earlier, and I've got a couple of the similar struggles that I think that a couple of the commissioners are struggling with. One, calling floodplain an outlot, you know, in a conservation subdivision doesn't really sit well with the spirit of the conservation subdivision. You know, we'd like to see it be usable space, additional buffer for neighbors, things like that. The applicant's building on the property to the maximum of the ability based on the yield plan here. I would like to recommend to the commission that if we do get a motion for approval, the one thing that would be important for me to see is the property lines not going to the floodplain or to the wetlands. So, you know, pulling those lots back. And although I do like bigger lots, one of the concerns, you know, when we just put in a subdivision on the river before was that floodplain was going to get mowed, that vegetation was going to get taken down, and that was going to, you know, continue to add to the trouble of runoff with the river. So I think that one thing would be desirable for me to see if we could, you know, do something with that. The second question that I've got, I think for staff that I didn't ask earlier today is, you know, we've got several ponds on the property. I know in my subdivision, just the just the recertification every 5 years. I think ours last year for 2 ponds was about $2,000, $2,500. Who would be the responsible parties for the stormwater detention ponds on this?
Well, there'd be an association created, then the association would have to deal with the recertification process and the fiscal responsibility of it. I mean, the other issue too with, you know, the yield plan, you could do what was done on the Birch CSM on up on the east side, northeast side, when they basically did individual on-site retention, rain gardens basically, and then we're dealing with separate individual owners. So this is another benefit where there'll be an association created and they'll be responsible for the ponds. And the ponds may not take this shape or this quantity as well. I mean, that comes again later with the preliminary plat. This is just concept plan, and you know, we don't require that at this point because if it's not approved, that's just a lot of wasted resources. So so that could change, but in this case, you have basically a 7-lot subdivision, and that subdivision will be equally responsible for the maintenance, and that'll be in the development agreement that would come forward with the preliminary plat.
I have a question.
Commissioner Chorin, and then I'll take you next.
See if I understand you right. If you're suggesting that the property line be moved to the north so that all the wetlands would be to the south of that property line, is that what you're suggesting?
My recommendation was that the property line gets shifted north, and then I think Alderman Strelchek is requesting that then it also include the floodplain. So in this case, the wetland is the most limiting factor. So lot 5 wouldn't be impacted. Lot 6, the line would then be in this location here, which is the floodplain, and lot 7 would be in here. And those lots are 1.28 and 1.4. So by reducing that, you're still going to have 3/4 acre lots easy. So I don't think that's an issue as well. You still have a nice buildable area, and then that will protect that area in the floodplain from even being disturbed at all.
But would that then allow you to move the stormwater off to the south?
I believe, and Cole can here to speak, I'm not the engineer, but I can try. I still believe the stormwater ponds, for the most part, have to be outside the floodplain for quantity. Cole, if you want to speak to that one.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you I haven't met too, I'm Cole McCraw, the assistant city engineer. So yeah, the 2 northmost ponds they show on there are for stormwater quantity, so that'll take they'll probably be dry ponds or something similar. And then that one to the south, shown in the floodplain, would likely be a wet pond or a bioretention, something for water quality.
What does it mean, water quality?
That'll be like your suspended solids, like basically taking all the pollutants out of the water, stormwater runoff. Yep.
Awesome. Commissioner Bach.
Yeah, just a question, and I'm not sure if are there any neighbors impacted on this, or were there any neighbor comments with this project?
I received an email and a phone call just requesting information, but I didn't hear any other feedback from anybody else.
Okay.
I know there's several of them here tonight, but I don't think any of them filled out a card that I'm aware of.
I see Wendy Porterfield with something in her hand, waving it. We typically take these early, but
Sorry,
just introduce yourself again.
Hi, I'm Wendy
tonight.
Porterfield. I'm a Mequon resident. I've lived on the river for about 30 years. I can see Villa Grove Park from my backyard. I just wanted to say that about where the new road is about where Public Works put the barricades up several times a year because the road completely floods over and is inaccessible. And I'm concerned about fill, what's coming in to fill these areas when these new buildings go in. I'm also concerned about the floodplain area. Villa Grove Park is on my Adopt a Highway road. I take care of it, and I'm down there several times a week. Villa Grove Park also is about 2/3 underwater certain times of the year, sometimes several times a year. I've walked that Villa Grove Road and stepped over fish swimming across the road at certain times. The river's very low right now, but that is not always the case. I also want to mention that the boat traffic and kayak traffic has increased probably tenfold in the past several years as people have been trying to spend more time outdoors, and that Villa Grove Road is full of boats, vehicles towing boats, cars towing kayaks, and people walking their dogs. It's really the only park in our area that's accessible to all of us who live in that part of it. 30 years I've been on the river, so this makes me nervous. It looks like a lot of houses on a small piece that is in the floodplain, and a lot of mud. But that's just what I wanted to speak of, is especially Villa Grove Road.
Thanks.
And just to clarify, the floodplain here is at 662 elevation. The road is about 675, so that's, a good 13 feet above the floodplain. And when you get back to Villa Grove, you're down in the 658 and lower area. So you're talking about close to 20-foot difference in elevation from where this road is proposed versus where the river is.
Okay. And Commissioner Stoker was next.
I was going to suggest, if it was a large concern of yours, if you wanted to do something like the Birch subdivision and have private rain gardens in lieu of the stormwater detention. I don't even know if it's viable on this size lot or not. If you're concerned about individual homeowners, when I had controlling interest there, I actually put it as part of the HOA responsibilities. It's not, we took it out of the individual homeowners to make sure that it did get inspected and got done. It was now an association thing rather than 4 individuals in our case. In this case, it would be 7. So that could certainly be something that could be done. Again, I'm not opposing the stormwater detention either. I don't know what the most feasible on this site is. I don't even know if rain gardens really would be feasible here.
Yeah, I don't even know if we're there yet at this point.
Okay. But you can remove that concern, because I think if you've got the HOA responsible, you don't have to worry about 4 individual owners. Just let the homeowners association pay for it every couple of years or 5 years. So that was one thing. And then the staff had recommended wanting the consistent tree line along Brystad. Is that something later on too, as far as?
That'll come back with the preliminary plat development agreement. There'll be a landscaping plan we would have at that point.
Commissioner Becker.
One more. I just mentioned this to Commissioner Stoker, but the 50 by 70 building pad, is that realistic? I don't know what price point you're working with. I don't know how many square feet that might yield, but something we've seen on repeat is these concept plans kind of come forward, and it's a building pad that looks kind of tidy and small, and then when the reality comes of people who actually want to build the lots and what you might want to sell them for, it's much bigger because it's like a McMansion. And so I just want to make sure that we're not looking at this and saying, oh, this, I won't say it, but others might say this looks neat and tidy. And then the reality of it is the houses that people anticipate building are much bigger. A lot of times that impacts the specimen trees. It has trickle-down effect. So is 50 by 70, is that actually feasible and reasonable, or is that perhaps underestimating?
Well, it's a placeholder. Typically we used to use 40 by 60 for a number of years. So they threw the 50 by 70 on there. And these are more meant to be placeholders. They're not meant to be, realistic in terms of what is actually get built on each individual lot. That'll be dictated by the setbacks, which are also shown on the plat. You'll see probably hard to see on the screen, but you have dashed lines there. That's the setback area. So that's really the buildable area. So they can go. The reason you put the pad on there is to address some of your concerns, like is there enough area to put something without impacting specimen trees? So if we make a determination that we want these to remain, then they have to understand that condition must remain as is, and you can't touch that, so you have to work within that area. But again, on some of these other lots, especially like lot 6 or even lot 7, you have a lot larger area to build in versus what the pad shows. So that those will be adjusted. The smaller ones, these will probably be pretty tight, so they'll probably be pretty accurate to what the setback shows. So even if somebody wants to build on lot 2, they have to abide by the side yard setbacks.
Or they come and ask for an exception. Yeah.
Well, once the plat's approved, that's theirs, they can't do that. That's require a plat amendment, that's a
They
whole.
give trees.
Yeah, the tree issue, yeah, that's a different issue.
Would the road remain a private road, or would that be turned over to the city?
The subdivision road is shown as private, and it would have to remain as private without going through an amendment process to the PUD, because we're already dictating the concept plan, and these property lines are going to the center line. So if you did a public road and they had to dedicate all that land, these lots would get a lot smaller. So that would be, at least in our opinion, a significant change to the PUD, which would require amendments.
We've had an awful lot of discussion, but haven't leaned back to the applicant. Do you have anything that you'd like to add, or are you okay with how this is getting vetted out?
I'm comfortable with how Jack's explaining it. The one thing I do want to note is the stormwater pond will be a dry pond. The one to the east there. So that will be a dry pond. That one.
This one here?
Yes. And the shape of that pond is going to change. It may be elongated to frame the back side of lots 5, 6, and 7.
That'd be great. Anything else you'd like to add?
That's really it.
Just wanted to make sure that you had time. Yeah. Sean, I can't read your last name. Portion? If you can come to the podium. He doesn't know if he supports or opposes, but he does wish to speak, so.
Yeah. I honestly have a couple of questions. I mean, someone was up here earlier asking about the fill level and really didn't get an answer. But my biggest issue is that my understanding was that this meeting was to decide whether to change the zoning or not. And all I've heard so far is all the reasons why it's going to be changed. And I don't understand why it's getting changed. There's not a 3/4 acre lot anywhere near there. There are no lots under 1 acre in that entire area of Mequon, other than along the river itself, which are all not declared non-buildable. I don't know, just because it can be rezoned, I don't know that that's a good idea. There are no other lots that size. We're talking about a 50 by 70 house that's 3,500 square feet. You stack that too high and you got a 7,000 square foot house on a 3/4 acre lot. I don't understand how that's a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Jack, do you want to comment to that? Or
Yes, I would
can
say,
as well?
I mean, Village Park is relatively close to there, and every one of those subdivisions are conservation type subdivisions with lots down to 1/4 to 1/3 of an acre in size, and they're all based on the same 1 acre yield as this one is.
So I'll highlight for you why we go to a PUD. If you've got a 1 acre density and you're allowed to build a house on a 1 acre lot, and the yield shows that you can legitimately build a house on 1 acre, which is what it's currently zoned for. The conservation subdivision is designed to add a road in, move the setbacks back a little bit further to give neighbors a little bit more privacy, preserve some of the natural features of the parcel, and that's where you get with some of the smaller lot sizes. Now, the tolerance on what the smaller lot sizes are based on the PUDs that we've seen here would be the only thing that I think would come into question, A, here, and then B, at Planning Commission. I know we do. At Common Council, I know we do have a couple council members that are pretty sensitive once we get down to that 1/2 acre size lot. That's something that they prefer to not see. So that's the reason for the zoning. The PUD is a planned unit development, which actually gives the city more ability to require tree screening and certain other features that are going to give this neighborhood a little bit better appeal moving forward. I'll invite you to speak once, but this typically isn't a back and forth. So if you've got another comment that you'd like to make, we'd be happy to hear.
Yeah, the other comment I would like to make is that on the end of Freistadt Road, there was also conservancy set up that later was returned back to the previous owner so that they could resell the property. And so making another conservancy area doesn't really impress me all that much. I will say that this property is 14.8 acres. And if you can't fit 1 acre lots on it, then maybe it wasn't intended to have 7 houses. Thanks.
Thanks.
I guess again, it's a preferencing, and it's, it's kind of, there's competing criteria here. We're trying to keep the wetlands and the floodplain off the lots, which makes them smaller. I mean, we could, in a sense, you could still do something similar to this by shifting that private roads to the south, make those lots larger, and then push 5, 6, and 7 further closer to the wetland and floodplain. So, again, typically on Seward lots, we go down, some areas in Villa Park are probably 1/4 acre, a third. Like some of the newer stuff we've done in Highlander Estates, those are 1/3. These are still, the smallest one on here, I believe, is 0.58 acres. So these are still relatively large lots for a conservation design of a Seward nature. But again, if we could shift those to make them even larger, but then you're encroaching lots into the wetland and floodplain, which is again undesirable, again, from a conservation standpoint.
Alderman Nervin?
Jack, could you go back to the yield plan just to explain that the conservation subdivision concept? It's often misunderstood. I think what we have here are 7 1-acre lots.
Correct. Well, these are the ones that, they show a boundary line down here, but these actually could extend all the way down to the property line here. These could
correct, much like lots. The lots to the west where it's
it's all
a long strip, and it's
correct.
It's 1.5 acres, and there's maybe a 1/2 acre of buildable space up front, and it's all floodplain to the south. So I think the difference between lot size and density is something where we often trip over each other here, council, general public. I think the point with this slide is that with the existing zoning today, no changes, the developer could build this and get the same number of houses on it. It doesn't mean we like it, or it doesn't mean we love it or hate it. It just means that it's legally permissible without any action from this body necessary. So we're debating whether we would like to allow the conservation subdivision concept to have a better layout. I personally like conservation subdivisions. This is maybe a corner case of how we typically employ them, where most of what we're conserving is actually already going to be conserved. But there are some good points being made here with keeping the lots off the floodplain, off the wetland for sure, off the floodplain secondarily. Now the concept plan doesn't show that yet, but maybe there'll be an amendment to make it so.
Or a motion.
Well, we need to propose an amendment to the plan as presented, I think. If someone wants to make it, I'll entertain seconding it.
Okay, before we do that, if we could, I've got Gene Johnson, who is opposed and does wish to speak. Okay, and then we'll close for.
I just wanted to say that we're probably the closest neighbor to the east. And Villa Grove Road is not like any other road. It's constantly being used by bikers. It ends at the park where there's a boat dock, so people are coming up and down that road with their boat constantly, 6, 7, 8 months a year. It's a very popular road for walkers. There's almost always somebody going up and down that road, and I just think the density entering from Villa Grove Road is going to be a real problem. 7 homes coming onto that little, what's almost a private road. It ends at the end of his property where the park is in the public boat landing. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Not like, it's a through street or something. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Chong?
This may be a question for Jack or the developer. You kind of brought this up. If you go back to the plan, if if the access road was shifted to the south, making lots 6 and 7 smaller, it would allow lots 1, 2, and 3 to be larger. I guess I'm trying to understand why that wouldn't be entertained.
Well, because again, we want to keep the environmental features off individual private lots. So in this,
you want to stay out of the floodplain.
yeah, you want to stay out of the floodplain, out of the wetlands. So you want to, and again, you know, I think the road will be fine either way, but you want your road to be a higher elevation if possible. So the further you go south of that road, you're going to be at a lower elevation.
And I suppose if you look at the line of the floodplain, it creates a kind of a lot similar in size to the ones that are north of the roadway. Yeah, okay, I understand.
So back to Phil, I guess I've got one more question. We show the pads here if they'd build a home that's addressed at preliminary plat, correct?
I didn't understand the question.
There's a concern about fill.
Okay.
So in order to try to address that, you know, you get a building pad. Maybe Commissioner Stoker can talk a little bit about how that works in the home building process. But what I've seen is that, you know, we approve the house, we approve the site, you know, the subdivision, and then, you know, the building pad's there, and then somebody decides they want an exposed basement, and they bring in 12 feet of fill and put that house up higher. How do we establish that level in which that house can?
When they submit for their preliminary plat, they have to submit a grading plan. That'll dictate the spot grades for each individual lot and whether they would be able to accomplish a exposure. And if they want to deviate from that plan, they would have to return to this body and try to get approval of an amended grading plan. And it's been done in the past. It's, you know, staff hasn't supported that, but that has been done in the past. But on a site like this, I don't know if there's, I mean, typically when we see an amendment or change, it's on a 5-acre lot where there's a lot of play. With these lots, you're not going to get a lot of play, so whatever they come up with their approved grading plan, they're going to have to probably stick with, else you could have impacts to the surrounding property owners in this subdivision and potentially to the west.
Okay.
But that'll come forward again at the time of preliminary plat.
Right. Thank you. Any additional feedback? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to make an amendment to redraw the southern property lines to get the totality of the wetland and the floodplain off the private lots as we've discussed, but no one's actually made an amendment yet until now. So,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the very last thing you said. You kind of backed away from the.
oh, sorry. I was just stating that we hadn't made an actual amendment yet to do the thing we had talked about, getting the totality of the wetland and the floodplain off the private lots. I think that's for the better of this subdivision and more in check with the spirit of the conservation subdivision. I think it's possible. You'll have more uniform lot sizes.
I think you could make a motion to amend condition number 2 to include floodplain, and that would cover it.
What Jack said.
I said you could make a motion to amend condition 2 in the report and to include floodplain, because it already states wetland.
I will second that if that is your motion.
Yep.
As clarified by Jack, yes.
Any further discussion on the motion to amend? So we're voting on the amendment.
Well,
no, this would be just a full motion to
making
approve
the full
with
motion.
the condition. Changed condition.
So if you want to scratch yours, I can make a motion that will include that, changing number 2.
I'm used to debating motion or amendments separately from the main motion. We can do whatever we want, Mr. Chairman.
Let's separate them out.
Okay.
So
I would still second his amendment then.
second is amendment. All right. Let's take a roll call on this.
On the amendment?
On the amendment only.
Okay. Commissioner Hawley.
Aye.
Commissioner Gentes.
Aye.
Commissioner Chorin.
Aye.
Commissioner Jim Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Stoker.
Aye.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer.
Aye.
Alderman Nurbin.
Aye.
Alderman Strelchuk.
Aye.
Amendment passes.
The amendment passes. All right. And then motion on the Main item at the table.
As amended.
I'll make a motion to approve per staff's 12 recommendations and including the amendment.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call the roll once again, please.
Sure. Commissioner Hawley?
Aye.
Commissioner Chorin?
Aye.
Commissioner Gentis?
Aye.
Commissioner Jim Schaefer?
Aye.
Commissioner Stoker?
Aye.
Commissioner Becky Schaefer?
No.
Alderman Nerben?
Aye.
Alderman Strelchak?
No.
Vote passes 6-2.
Vote passes 6-2. All right. Item C on the agenda was canceled.
Can I just interrupt?
Yep.
So
please.
There was a reason item C was canceled. There's a technicality of our code. They requested to revisit a previously approved item at Planning Commission, but there's basically a 90-day shot clock on that. So they're not allowed to bring it forward. We found out, and that's why it was taken off. But based on the timing, that would push them to January's meeting unless this body made a motion to bring back that item for reconsideration in December, which then if you do reconsider in December, you can revisit the item in December. It would give him a month earlier time frame to get a decision from the commission. If that makes sense.
So what are we being
Yes,
asked?
it does. What does staff prefer we do?
We would prefer that this get acted upon by the commission as quick
I
as
will make a
possible.
motion to bring it back in December.
So yeah, you're basically making a motion to put the item on for reconsideration in December.
This item?
Yes.
As shown?
Yes.
Okay. Got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that item will be brought back in December. Announcements, next meeting is Monday, December 13th, 2021 at 6 p.m. And Robin did note that meeting is a little bit out of sequence, so just please do mark your calendars for that next meeting. And then we got one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.